Police! Hold up, let me see your ID. Do it now.
Excuse me? I'm a federal judge. Do you have a warrant?
Yeah, right. Stop reaching in that purse. Keep your hands out.
You asked for ID. I am getting my credentials.
I don't care who you are. Get on the ground. Get down.
Stop, officer. Stop.
The parking lot cameras caught every single second. Every aggressive move, every shouted order, and every massive mistake. Agent Rory Evans had no idea who he was really dealing with. He thought he was taking down a suspicious person near a luxury car. He had no clue that the silver-haired woman in the blue floral dress had spent the last 25 years sitting on a federal bench. Judge Megan Ross wasn't just a grandmother loading a Mercedes, she was a legal powerhouse. She had spent decades ruling on civil rights cases and holding government agencies accountable. She wasn't panicking and she wasn't begging. She was documenting. She knew the law better than the entire tactical team combined, and she knew that this one-minute encounter was about to become a $3.7 million nightmare for the government. Before we see the shocking video of the arrest that ended multiple careers, I need you to do something. Drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from, your city, your state, or your country. And if you believe that nobody is above the law, especially those wearing a badge, hit that subscribe button. This story is about to get much more intense. You don't want to miss what happened at the station. Megan Ross woke up early like she did every Saturday. For 25 years, she had served as a federal judge. Her life was built on rules and fairness. She spent her days in a black robe, making hard decisions that changed people's lives. But on this morning, she was just Megan. She put on a comfortable blue floral dress and a dark cardigan. She grabbed her glasses and her purse. It was a simple day for errands. She needed a few things for her home and planned to visit the mall. She enjoyed these quiet mornings. They were a break from the high-stakes world of the courtroom. As she drove her black Mercedes to the outdoor mall, she wasn't thinking about the law. She was thinking about what to buy for dinner. She felt safe and happy. She had worked hard for her success and her beautiful car. She was a respected member of her community. But in a few hours, all of that respect would be ignored. The silver-haired judge was about to face a situation she never expected. She thought the law protected everyone, but she was about to find out that some people only see what they want to see. For now, she pulled into a parking spot and headed into the shops, unaware that eyes were already watching her every move. Ethan Lewis was a young security guard at the mall. He liked the feeling of power his uniform gave him. As he walked through the parking lot, he saw a black Mercedes. He saw an elderly black woman loading bags into the trunk. Instead of seeing a shopper, he saw a problem. He thought she looked out of place. To him, someone like her shouldn't own a car that expensive. He didn't look at her calm face or her nice clothes. He only saw a person who didn't fit his idea of a luxury car owner. Without checking anything, Ethan reached for his radio. He didn't call the local police. He called ICE. He told them there was a suspicious person near high-end vehicles. He claimed she might be trying to steal the car or that her papers might not be right. It was a call based on nothing but his own bias. He watched from a distance, feeling proud of himself. He thought he was being a hero, but he was actually starting a disaster. His phone call was the spark that would lead to a $3 million lawsuit. He didn't know that the woman he was reporting was one of the most powerful legal minds in the state. He just saw someone he didn't like and decided to make her life difficult. That one phone call changed everything. Agent Rory Evans was not far away. He was an ICE agent who loved the tactical side of his job. He wore a dark navy uniform with heavy gear and a vest that said ICE in big letters. He was always looking for a reason to use his training. When the call came in about a suspicious person at the mall, he didn't ask for more details. He didn't care about a description of a crime. He just heard black female and luxury car and decided to move in fast. Evans liked to be in control. He grabbed 2 other agents and drove straight to the parking lot. He didn't want to talk. He wanted to show force. He believed that coming in strong was the best way to handle any situation. He didn't stop to think if a 70-year-old woman in a floral dress was actually a threat. In his mind, she was a suspect because someone said she was. He was ready for a fight, even if there wasn't one. As he pulled his truck behind the Mercedes, he felt like he was doing something important. He was about to use his power against a woman who knew more about that power than he did. Evans wanted a win for his record, but he was about to get a permanent mark on it instead. Judge Megan Ross was almost finished. She had a large brown paper bag and a teal folder in her hands. She was carefully placing them in the trunk of her Mercedes. Suddenly, the sound of heavy boots hitting the pavement filled the air. 3 men in dark, tactical gear surrounded her. The sun was hidden by clouds, making the scene feel even more tense. "Step away from the vehicle. Hands where I can see them," Agent Evans shouted. Megan froze for a second, surprised by the noise. She looked up and saw the ice patches on their vests. She didn't drop her bags. She slowly turned around to face them. She saw Evans standing closest to her, his hand near his weapon. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her heart was starting to race. "I said move away from the car. Now." Evans stepped closer, trying to crowd her. Megan stood her ground. She was between her open trunk and these armed men. She knew her rights, but she also knew how dangerous this moment was. The other 2 agents stood behind Evans, watching her like she was a criminal. To anyone watching, it looked like a major bust. To Megan, it was a confusing and scary attack on her peaceful afternoon. She was just a woman loading her car, but to them, she was a target. Megan Ross knew she had to take control of the situation. She had spent years handling angry lawyers and loud defendants. She took a deep breath and used her courtroom voice. It was a voice that was loud, clear, and very calm. It was a voice that demanded respect. "Agent, listen to me very carefully," she said. "I am not a threat to you. I am a citizen loading my own vehicle." She didn't move her hands quickly. She kept them visible. "My name is Megan Ross. I am a sitting federal judge for this district. My identification is in my purse, which is right here." She tried to de-escalate the tension. She wanted them to see that she was not a criminal. She hoped that her title would make them stop and think. But Agent Evans didn't want to listen. He saw her calm attitude as being difficult. He didn't like that she wasn't shaking or crying. "I don't care about your titles," Evans barked. "We have a report of suspicious activity. You need to stop talking and follow orders." Megan could see the ego in his eyes. He had made up his mind. He wasn't looking for the truth. He was looking for a reason to arrest her. She realized that her words weren't working. This was no longer a simple misunderstanding. It was a battle of wills, and the man with the badge was refusing to follow the law. Judge Megan Ross moved very slowly. She did not want to give these men any reason to be violent. She reached into her purse and pulled out her official federal ID. The card had a gold seal in her picture. It clearly stated that she was a United States federal judge. She held it out so Agent Evans could see it. "This is my identification," she said calmly. "It proves who I am and that I have the right to be here." Evans did not even take the card from her hand. He barely looked at it. He let out a mean laugh and shook his head. "I've seen plenty of these fake cards," he said. "Anyone can print a fancy badge at home. You're not a judge. You're a suspect who is trying to trick federal agents." Megan was shocked. She had spent her whole life following the law and making sure others did too. To have her life's work dismissed as a lie was a deep insult. "Agent, you can call the courthouse right now," she urged. "They will confirm my identity. You are making a huge mistake that will have serious consequences." But Evans was not listening. To him, the ID was just a distraction. He was so sure he was right that he refused to see the truth. He saw a black woman in an expensive car, and in his mind, that was enough to make her a criminal. By ignoring her credentials, he was crossing a line he could never go back across. He was choosing his own bias over the clear evidence in front of him. This was the moment the legal battle truly began. About 30 feet away, a woman named Maeve Wright stood by her car. She had just finished her own shopping when she saw the dark ICE vehicles pull up. She saw the 3 agents surround the elderly woman in the blue floral dress. Maeve felt a knot in her stomach. Something about the scene felt completely wrong. The agents looked like they were going to war, while the woman looked like someone's grandmother. Maeve reached into her pocket and pulled out her smartphone. She didn't say a word. She just held the phone up and hit the red record button. Through her screen, She captured the entire confrontation. She recorded the moment Judge Ross held out her ID and the way Agent Evans pushed it away. She captured the calm look on the judge's face and the aggressive stance of the agents. Maeve knew that in a situation like this, the truth could easily be hidden. She wanted to make sure there was a digital witness. The camera didn't blink. It caught the contrast between the silver-haired woman and the men in tactical vests. It caught the overcast light of the parking lot and the open trunk of the Mercedes. Maeve's hands were shaking slightly, but she didn't stop. She knew that this video might be the only way to get justice. She was recording a piece of history that would soon be seen by millions of people across the country. Every second of footage was more evidence for the lawsuit that was coming. Agent Evans noticed that a crowd was starting to form. He could see people like Maeve Wright holding up their phones. He could hear the whispers of other shoppers who had stopped to watch. Instead of cooling down, Evans felt his anger grow. He felt like the people watching were a challenge to his power. In his mind, backing down now would make him look weak. He had already called the judge a liar, and he felt he had to prove he was the boss. This was the ego trap. He was more worried about his pride than about doing the right thing. He stepped even closer to Megan Ross, entering her personal space. "You think having a crowd will help you?" he hissed. "It just makes it worse. You're being belligerent and uncooperative." Megan looked at him with pity. She saw a man who was trapped by his own mistakes. "I am standing still, Agent," she said softly. "The only one being aggressive here is you." Her calm words only made him more upset. He wanted her to be scared. He wanted her to beg. When she didn't, he decided to end the conversation with force. He looked at his partners and gave a small nod. He was done talking. He was going to show everyone in the parking lot exactly what happens when someone questions him. He didn't realize that every aggressive move he made was being saved on a dozen different phones. He was digging a hole for his career, and he was doing it in front of the whole world. "Turn around and face the vehicle," Evans shouted. Before Megan could even react, he grabbed her arm. He used a lot of force, spinning the 70-year-old woman around toward the trunk of her car. Megan gasped as her shoulder was jerked back. The brown paper bag she was holding dropped to the ground, and her groceries spilled across the pavement. Evans pushed her against the cold metal of the Mercedes. He pulled her arms behind her back with a rough tug. Megan felt a sharp pain in her wrists as the metal handcuffs clicked shut. The cold steel bit into her skin. She didn't scream or fight back. She kept her head up, even as her face was inches away from the car she had worked so hard to buy. The image was heartbreaking. A respected federal judge, a grandmother with silver hair, being treated like a violent criminal. Her blue floral dress was wrinkled against the car, and her glasses were nearly knocked off her face. The two other agents stood guard, making sure no one from the crowd got too close. They acted like they had just caught a dangerous fugitive. In reality, they had just assaulted a woman who represented the very law they were supposed to protect. The physical arrest was over in seconds, but the damage to the agency would last for years. Megan felt the weight of the handcuffs and knew that her life had just changed forever. She remained silent, knowing that the law would eventually speak for her. As the agents started to lead Megan toward their vehicle, the crowd couldn't stay quiet any longer. The parking lot was filled with the sound of angry voices. "What is wrong with you?" someone shouted. "She's an old woman." Another person yelled, "She told you she's a judge. Why aren't you listening?" The agents tried to ignore the noise, but the anger was everywhere. Maeve Wright moved closer, still filming. "I've got it all on video," she cried out. "Everyone saw what you did." One of the shoppers, a man who recognized Megan from the news, began telling everyone nearby who she was. "That's Judge Megan Ross," he shouted. "She's a federal judge. You can't just do that to her." The word judge spread through the parking lot like a wildfire. The heckling turned into a roar of outrage. People were shocked that federal agents would be so reckless and biased. Agent Evans kept a stiff face, but his eyes looked nervous for the first time. He tried to walk faster, pushing Megan toward the back of the transport truck. The crowd followed them, voices rising in a chorus of protest. It was no longer just a suspicious person report. it was a public scandal happening in real time. The agents were being surrounded by the very people they were supposed to serve. As the doors of the ICE vehicle slammed shut, the last thing Megan heard was the crowd demanding justice for her. She sat in the dark, cramped back of the truck, feeling the vibration of the engine. Outside, the world was already starting to react to the biggest mistake these agents would ever make. The ride to the processing center was filled with a heavy, thick silence. Megan Ross sat in the back of the transport truck. The metal seat was cold and hard against her legs. Her hands were still pulled behind her back, and every time the truck hit a bump, the handcuffs pulled at her shoulders. It was a sharp, biting pain, but she did not make a sound. She sat perfectly upright, keeping her dignity even in the dark. Across from her, Agent Evans stared out the small, barred window. He didn't look at her. He didn't say a word. Maybe he was starting to feel a tiny bit of doubt, or maybe he was just enjoying his win. But Megan wasn't thinking about him anymore. Her mind was already at work, moving like a machine. She was thinking about the laws he had broken and the rights he had stepped on. She was counting the minutes of her detention. She was memorizing the names she had seen on the agent's patches. To Evans, this was just a successful bust. To Megan, it was the start of a massive legal battle. She knew that every second she spent in this truck was adding more money to the lawsuit she would eventually file. The silence wasn't a sign of her giving up. It was the quiet before a giant storm. She was a judge, and she knew that the law was patient. As the truck pulled into the gated facility, Megan took one last deep breath. She was ready to let the system see exactly what it had done. When the truck doors opened, Megan was led into a bright, sterile room for intake. The air smelled like industrial cleaner and old coffee. Officer Camila Diaz was the person assigned to handle the booking. She was a veteran officer who had processed thousands of people. She didn't even look up at first. "Name and date of birth," Diaz said in a bored voice. Megan spoke clearly. "Megan Ross, July 14th. Diaz began to type, then reached for the bag of personal items the agents had taken from Megan. She pulled out the wallet and opened it to find the ID. As her eyes fell on the federal judge credentials, she froze. She saw the official gold seal and the title, United States District Judge. Diaz looked at the ID, then looked at the silver-haired woman in the floral dress, then back at the ID. The color drained from her face. She knew that name. Everyone in the legal world in this district knew Judge Ross. She was the one who presided over the most important cases in the city. Diaz's hands began to shake as she held the card. She looked over at Agent Evans, who was leaning against a wall, looking proud of himself. "Where did you get her?" Diaz whispered, her voice cracking. "Parking lot of the mall," Evans replied. She was being suspicious. Diaz didn't respond. She stood up so fast her chair hit the wall. She didn't finish the booking. Instead, she grabbed the ID and ran toward the back offices. She knew that every second Judge Ross remained in handcuffs was a second that could end all of their careers. Inside the main office, Captain Abel King was looking over some paperwork when Officer Diaz burst in. She didn't knock. She just dropped the federal ID on his desk. "Captain, we have a code red in the intake room," she said, her voice trembling. King picked up the card and read the name. He stood up immediately, his eyes wide with horror. He wasn't just worried. He was terrified. As the watch commander, he was responsible for everything that happened in this building. He knew that arresting a sitting federal judge without a warrant or a very good reason was a massive civil rights violation. It was the kind of mistake that destroyed agencies. "Who brought her in?" King barked. "Evans and his team," Diaz replied. King didn't wait to hear more. He ran out of his office and down the hallway toward the processing area. He saw Agent Evans standing there, looking confused by the sudden panic. King didn't even look at Evans. He went straight to Megan Ross. "Judge Ross, I am Captain King," he said, his voice full of regret. "I am so incredibly sorry for this situation. We are releasing you immediately." He signaled for Diaz to get the keys. As the handcuffs were unlocked, Megan didn't smile. She rubbed her sore wrists and looked King right in the eye. "Captain, the release is fine," she said coldly. "But the damage is already done. I want every single record of this encounter preserved. Do not delete a single frame of video." King nodded quickly, feeling the weight of the $3.7 million disaster that was about to hit his department. Just as Captain King was trying to apologize for the 5th time, the phone on the intake desk began to ring. It was a private, high-level line. Diaz answered it, and her eyes went even wider. "It's for you, Captain," she said, handing him the phone. "It's the Chief Judge." King took the phone with a shaking hand. On the other end was Judge Olive Phillips, the woman in charge of the entire federal court system for the region. Her voice was like ice. She didn't ask questions. She made statements. She told King that she was aware of the unlawful arrest of Judge Ross. She told him that the Department of Justice had already been notified. She made it clear that the blue wall of protection for police officers would not save them this time. While King was on the phone, the atmosphere in the station changed completely. The other agents, who had been laughing and joking just minutes ago, were now silent. They realized that they weren't just in trouble with their boss. They were in trouble with the federal government. Agent Evans tried to step forward to explain himself, but King held up a hand to silence him. The power had shifted completely. Megan Ross was no longer a suspect. She was the most powerful person in the room. The Chief Judge's call was the final blow to the agent's ego. They had treated a hero like a criminal, and now the entire weight of the legal system was coming down on their heads. The investigation they thought they were conducting was over, and the investigation into their own behavior had just begun. The front doors of the station swung open, and Catherine Perry Esker walked in. She was one of the top civil rights lawyers in the country and a longtime friend of Megan Ross. She didn't look like she was there to talk. She looked like she was there to win. She walked straight to the desk and demanded to see her client. "I am Catherine Perry," she told the officers. "I am here for Judge Megan Ross. I expect her to be released with all her property immediately, or I will be filing for an emergency injunction within the hour." Captain King met her halfway. He didn't even try to argue. He led her to the room where Megan was waiting. When the two women saw each other, there was a brief moment of shared understanding. They knew exactly how much work was ahead of them. Catherine looked at Megan's red wrists and then at Agent Evans, who was still standing nearby. "I hope you enjoyed your afternoon, Agent," Catherine said sharply, "because it's the last one you'll ever spend with a badge." She then turned to King and demanded copies of all footage and the names of every person involved. Megan stood up and smoothed her blue floral dress. She picked up her purse and her teal folder. She walked out of the station with her head held high, flanked by her lawyer. She didn't look back at the agents who had assaulted her. She was finished with the station, but she was far from finished with the agents. As she stepped out into the fresh air, she knew that the battle for justice had only just moved to a new courtroom. By the time Maeve Wright got home, her heart was still thumping against her ribs. She sat at her kitchen table and looked at the footage on her phone. It was clear. It was raw. It showed exactly how a hero was treated like a criminal. She uploaded the video to the internet with a simple caption: "ICE agents just arrested a federal judge in a mall parking lot for loading her car." Within the first hour, it had 10,000 views. By the time the sun went down, that number had jumped to 5 million. People everywhere were sharing the video of the silver-haired woman in the blue floral dress being pushed against her own car. The next morning, the video had reached 20 million views. It was on every news station in the country. People were shocked to see the contrast between the calm judge and the aggressive agents in tactical gear. The footage showed Agent Evans ignoring the judge's ID and treating her with total disrespect. It became a symbol of what many people felt was wrong with the system. Public outrage grew as celebrities and leaders began to post the video, demanding to know how this could happen. Maeve's simple act of recording had created a digital witness that the government could not ignore. The video didn't just tell a story. It showed the truth in a way that made it impossible for the agency to make excuses. The world was now watching, and they were all asking for the same thing: accountability. Inside the city's legal offices, City Attorney Simon Clark sat in front of a large monitor. He watched the video for the 10th time. Beside him, the ICE field director looked pale. They weren't just looking at a video, they were looking at a $3.7 million disaster. Catherine Perry had filed the lawsuit on Monday morning, and it was a masterpiece of legal work. It detailed every single violation of the Fourth Amendment. It described the physical pain Judge Ross felt in her shoulders and the emotional harm of being humiliated in public. Clark knew right away that there was no way to win this case in court. The evidence was simply too strong. "We can't fight this," Clark said, leaning back in his chair. "The video shows her trying to be helpful. It shows her providing ID. And it shows your agents using force on a 70-year-old woman who did nothing wrong." The video evidence had stripped away any defense they might have had. They couldn't claim the judge was being difficult. They couldn't claim she was a threat. The government realized that a trial would only make things worse. Every day the story stayed in the news, the reputation of the agency sank lower. The decision was made to settle the case as quickly as possible. They offered the full $3.7 million, hoping to put the fire out. But for Megan Ross and her legal team, the money was only the beginning of the victory. While the lawyers talked about money, Callie Benton from the Department of Justice, DOJ, began a deep dive into the records. She didn't just look at the day of the arrest, she looked at every stop Agent Rory Evans had ever made. What she found was a dark and disturbing pattern. Callie uncovered that Evans had a long history of suspicious person reports that always targeted the same group of people. She found that over the last 3 years, Evans had stopped people of color at a rate 4 times higher than his fellow agents. The data was clear. Evans wasn't just following a bad report from a security guard. He was using his badge to act on his own internal bias. Callie's report showed that in almost every case, no crime had been committed. These were people just living their lives, going to work, shopping, or driving, who were treated like suspects because of how they looked. This pattern of profiling was exactly what Judge Ross had spent her career fighting against. The DOJ investigation proved that the arrest in the parking lot wasn't a one-time mistake. It was the result of a system that allowed agents like Evans to operate without being checked. Because of Callie's hard work, the truth about Evans's history was finally out in the open, and there was no way he would ever be allowed to wear a badge again. The final victory came 9 months after that overcast Saturday at the mall. Judge Megan Ross stood on the steps of the federal courthouse, flanked by Catherine Perry and a crowd of supporters. She announced that the $3.7 million settlement was finalized. But she didn't keep a single penny for herself. She donated the entire amount to create a new advocacy group for veterans and to fund police reform programs. This was never about the money, she told the rows of reporters. It was about making sure that the next woman in a floral dress is seen as a person, not a target. The lawsuit did more than just provide money. It led to new federal laws and strict protocols for ICE agents. Now, all agents were required to undergo intense training on implicit bias and the Fourth Amendment every single year. A new civilian board was created to watch over field operations and listen to complaints from the public. Agent Evans was fired and banned from working in law enforcement forever. Judge Ross returned to her bench, but she was different now. She had seen the system from the other side of the handcuffs. She used her trauma to build a legacy of fairness. As she walked back into the courthouse, she knew she had won her most important case. She had proven that while a badge gives you power, the law is what gives you justice. Megan's story shows us that even when you have reached the highest levels of success, bias can still change your life in a single moment. But it also proves that accountability is possible. It shows us that the system can actually work, and that there are real consequences when people in power break the law. We know that not every unlawful arrest ends with a victory like this. Not every case of profiling leads to new laws and a multi-million-dollar settlement. But this one did, and that is why it matters so much. Thank you for watching this story all the way through. If this video made you think differently about how the law should protect everyone, including our elders and our veterans, please share it with someone who needs to see it. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so we can keep bringing you these important stories of justice. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think $3.7 million was a fair amount for what Judge Ross went through? And what do you think real accountability should look like for agents who ignore the law? I'll see you in the next one.